What is up, my friend? Welcome to episode 75 of the Anthony Genomics podcast. On this episode, I thought I'd share what I experienced during my first LSD experience and what I learned from it. That sounds crazy to be sharing publicly. But if you're open to taking a journey down the rabbit hole with me and learning some practical lessons to take your life and business to the next level, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Anthony Genomics podcast. The one and only podcast designed to help you become unstoppable in life and business. My name is Anthony Genomics. My friends call me AJ. And my goal with this podcast is to help you remember who you truly are so you can maintain your center in the chaos, embody your potential, and unlock freedom in your life and business. That being said, let's get into today's show.
All right, well, welcome back. Now, before I hop into today's experience, I first want to go on record to say that I'm not advising you to do LSD. I'm not advising you to do acid. I am not advocating you to do that. I am simply sharing my experience and the wisdom that I personally gained with you. And also, before we dive down the rabbit hole, if I offered to help you break through to another level of wealth, health, prosperity, joy, and creativity within the next 90 days, some do it faster without burning you out so you can dominate your industry and your competition and connect with your family and your loved ones deeply, would you take me up on the offer? If yes, then I have a free training that will help you deconstruct your mental blocks and unlock your greatest potential so you get back your spark, your creativity, and have the edge to bring your big visions to life fast and dominate your competition. And you can access that training for free by going to trainingwithaj.com. Again, just go to trainingwithaj.com to access that free training. With that being said, let's dive down the rabbit hole and talk about my first LSD experience and how it changed my life. I'll tell you, it was a crazy cool journey. It was very friendly, and it was very different than my previous two journeys that I've done. The journeys I've done up to this point, one was with MDMA and another was with psilocybin, and this one was with LSD or acid, whatever you want to call it. And it was very different. I mean, LSD took a long time to come on. I mean, with MDMA and psilocybin, it seemed like, those medicines came on in like 35, 40 minutes. And I think with LSD, it seemed like, man, it took 60 to 90 minutes for it to really come on. I ended up taking 3 tabs. I wish I knew the dosage so I could tell you. I know my dosage on psilocybin and I know my dosage on MDMA, but I don't know the dosage of the LSD. I just don't know it. So since I didn't know what the dosage would be, I just really journaled around it. I took it to my daily dialogue practice. And for about 3 weeks leading up to the experience, I just really asked God, universe, spirit, consciousness, whatever you want to call it. I call it God. I really asked God, what do you want me to experience? I mean, how many tabs do you want me to take, for God's sake? And in my daily dialogue process in my journal of just conscious writing, I was told take 2 tabs for sure and that I could do 3. And so that's how I landed on taking 3 tabs. And I was also told my intention was to take into the experience was to really try and what do I really want to do for my future? What do I want to create moving forward? And this set up a very different experience from my other 2 journeys since it wasn't focused on the healing parts of me. You can go back and listen to episode number 5 to hear about my healing journey with psilocybin. With LSD, I was really focusing on expansion, and so it was a vastly different experience. So let's get into the journey. I'm just going to start at the top and just kind of work my way through my experience from top to bottom. It was quite the journey. So when the LSD first kicked in, I was sitting outside on the patio on this colorful rug with my cousin and my brother and one of his friends. My brother and my cousin, my brother and his friend, they were not doing LSD. It was just me and my cousin that were doing it together. And so we're sitting on this patio on this colorful rug, and the colors became super vibrant. I mean, they just started vibrating. It was like the colors were just popping off the rug. They essentially became this multi-dimensional experience. It's kind of hard to explain. And in that multi-dimensional experience, my mind kind of transported to a different world. And man, psychedelics, I tell you, they personally take me to a place where it seems like I just know information. It's like they access information within my body, within my mind, within my soul that's just truth. It's very hard to explain, but it's It's like truth. But in that place, several of my friends and my peers, like they appeared, and I won't mention their names, but there was this one guy who was a former coach of mine. He's a friend of mine. I had so much respect for this guy. And in this, like this little vision, he was like, yo, man, welcome to the party. You're a creator. Welcome. And I was just like, yo, dude, it's good to see you. And he wasn't there in like person, but I felt like he was like totally there in spirit. And then another colleague of mine appeared in that conglomeration of color, and he's a guy I really look up to into this whole business coaching world. And he was like, welcome, man. Now you know. Like, and he was like, almost like stoned out of his mind. He was like, welcome, man. Now you know. This is like all there is to the game. Everything you want already exists. You just have to manipulate the things to collect the cash, man. Now, the crazy thing about this guy is this guy makes a lot of posts about generating leads online and growing, your business and making 6 figures, 7 figures, 8 figures, whatever, like all about, making money. But he also posts a lot of political stuff as well. And in that moment, it was just like something within me like got it. I was like, oh, home dude is just manipulating people's attention so he can collect the cash. He's not stupid. He's actually really smart, super plugged in. He's just playing this character so he can collect cash and live life how he desires. Awesome. Like, it was just like I got it, how this guy was just kind of manipulating. And I'm using the word manipulate, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean like he understands the game, understands how to get people's attention, keep people's attention, make great offers, fulfill on those offers. But he sees it how it's just like a game and how he can manipulate people's attention to be able to create streams of cash for him. I don't mean that in a negative way. And then there was this other guy who's a coach, and he's a friend of mine, and I've honestly been contemplating, like, man, should I continue working with him, or do I feel really complete? If I do feel really complete, where should I go? And in kind of this nebulous place, this thought and feeling that appeared was like, the guy's soul is many years beyond his mind. It was like this intelligence beyond me was like, yo, this dude's soul is like way wiser than his mind is. Now, his mind will eventually catch up, but right now his mind is totally overcomplicating things, and it's time for you just to move on. And it was just like this download of wisdom from these 3 people. And I remember, like, at the end of kind of that download, I remember like kind of just not feeling 100% complete, especially on the third person. And I tried to go back to the visuals, but they had already kind of like vanished and moved on. And I was like, can we go back? I really want to figure out that and land on clarity, but they were just kind of gone. So I just chose to let it go. And I closed my eyes. And when I closed my eyes, I felt like I was like this, I don't know how to describe it. I was like this cosmic like king. And I just like started tapping on this rug that was, on top of this concrete on this patio. And I just kind of felt like I was just playing this tribal drum. So I remember looking over to my cousin. I was like, yo, dude, is my drumming like bothering you? He's like, no, man, I kind of like it. And I was like, okay, cool. So I just kept like drumming. And I'm not a drummer by any means, but it was like I knew how to bang out all these different beats. And it just felt good and it felt right. So I just kept drumming. And it was just kind of like I was marching the beat of my own cosmic drum. And that was a pretty cool experience. And I don't know how long that lasted, but eventually I opened my eyes and I asked my cousin if he wanted to walk out into the yard and like down by the lake, because we were staying at this incredible Airbnb that overlooked this beautiful lake in North Texas. And my cousin was like, yeah, man, I'm totally down. So we chose to walk down and sit down by this lake. And when we sat down by the lake, I remember like looking at the lake, and it looked like it was this, I don't know, something that Dali would paint, that painter dude who made the style of surrealism famous. The lake and the land, they just kind of looked like in that style, like everything kind of looked like I was in a surrealist painting, I guess you would say. And it was like super dark outside. By this point, it was probably 9 o'clock at night or 10 or 11. I don't remember the time, but it was super dark. But for him and I, it just seemed like so bright. And so we sat by this lake and we had an amazing deep conversation. And somehow we started talking about how like life is like a painting, and that we get to create like our own art piece. And the whole point of being a human being is to simply just create your art piece until you feel it's complete, and then just like move on to the next piece of creation. Like That's it. And I kept asking myself and I kept asking my cousin, I was like, well, what's the point of creation? And in that question, I got stuck in this loop, and it's hard to explain. It was like I could see the creation of something and then ask, well, what's the point of it? And then land on, to create. And then see the creation of that and then ask myself, well, what's the point of it? And then land on the answer of to create. And it was like this infinite loop of creation. It was like you create, but it's meaningless, but you create, but it's meaningless, but you create, but it's meaningless. And this creation, meaningless, creation, meaningless, creation, meaningless, it just kept looping over and over and over and over again. And for me, it was like an experience of the concept that I learned from Werner Arhart about the part of the beingness of being human is that life is empty and meaningless because it's empty and meaningless because it's empty and meaningless because it's empty and meaningless, to infinity. And also, as a human being, we are here to create. Now, for me, it was an experience of that deep philosophy. It was a great experience because for me, it really landed the concept home and made it an experience, not just a concept. It really brought the power of the paradox to life for me around that. On one hand, my life, your life, it means nothing. And for a lot of people, when I say this, your life means nothing, when they truly understand this, for a lot of people, they feel depressed. They're like, well, then what's the point of living if life is meaningless? And the answer to that question is, well, to create. And people are like, well, why would I create if it's meaningless? And it's like, well, because that's what you do as a human. You create, period. End of story. As a human being, when you come home, you create. It's what you do. You create. People think they have to be driven by something. You don't. I guarantee you, as a human being, you create simply because you create. Your soul could have chosen to be a rock or a space alien or anything or any aspect of consciousness, but it chose to be you. It chose to have the human experience as you. And in that, 1,000 years from now, if we're honest, no one's going to really care what you created while you lived. And to enjoy and fully embody this life as a human being, you get to create. That's your birthright, to experience creation as a human being. This was a powerful experience for me. Now, I don't know how long that loop lasted, but it felt like it lasted for a really long time. And from there, I then started thinking about my own business. My good friend had asked me a few weeks ago, he was like, dude, what is the client journey that we could take somebody on where they could work with us for 10 to 15 years? And it was a great question, one I'd never really considered. And I'd really been pondering that for a few weeks, and we kind of landed on a concept of a client journey of from self to sovereignty to supply, which meant helping someone remember who they truly are, which is an unlimited self, where they have nothing to prove or nothing to defend. They get to come home being comfortable in their own skin. And then from that place, they can go on a journey to be a sovereign creator where they can create life and their business however they so choose it. And from that place of sovereignty, they can then supply, meaning leave a legacy that ensures their values live on after they leave this earth. And that means different things for different people. But essentially, it's a never-ending path of just pure creation and helping someone to really fully embody their purpose and their potential. And as I started to ponder this potential client journey, I realized that there are only really two phases to this life as a human being. Number one, coming home and remembering the fact that you are an unlimited self capable of creating anything that you desire. And then from that place, number two, you are a sovereign creator who's creating your life moment by moment by moment, simply because that's what you are, a sovereign creator who's at cause. That's it. And then I kept asking, But what about supply? What about legacy? What about all of that stuff? And I kept coming back to legacy doesn't matter. It's all bullshit that the ego convinces you that's important, and it's not. Like, you create, you are a creator. You create simply because you create. That's it. End of story. You are a creator who creates simply because you create. That's it. And in this realization, I really kind of started to laugh, and I was like, oh shit. There are people in my industry who are selling people on this big ass path to purpose and prosperity only to help people realize it doesn't matter. Like, I found it hilarious. And I must sell people on a journey that doesn't matter because their ego desire it. And I must sell people on a journey that doesn't really truly matter in the grand scheme of things because their ego deeply desires it, and that is the only way to help them come home to remembering that they're an unlimited self who is then a sovereign creator. Like, I just thought this was so funny that I have to play this game of marketing to get them to buy into guide them to coming home, and then realize, okay, we go on this journey to create because we create. Like, that's just part of it. It's part of marketing. Like, it was just super funny to me. But that whole experience, it really helped me map out and have clarity on this is my own client journey. This is what I'm working on. This is where I'm taking people towards. This is what I'm doing. This is what I desire to create and lead people down. And after this discussion and realization, I realized whoa, I got to go pee. So then I asked my cousin, I was like, yo man, do you want to go back inside to go get some water and go pee and then come back outside because I'm really enjoying being outside? And he's like, yeah, dude, let's do that. So we walked back up to our Airbnb, and then after I peed and got some water, I was standing on the patio outside in the dark waiting on my cousin. And it was I kind of had this experience of feeling like this Viking warrior. I felt like I was just capable of creating and taking on anything in life. And in that, I realized I had been bringing this Viking warrior to my wife. And this character that I played out with her, it really wasn't serving her. I felt like she wanted a lover, not a warrior. And the warrior was, honestly, for me, the energy of the warrior was to be channeled into my business creations, but not how I show up and interact with my wife. It's really hard to explain. But I realized I had been showing up in confrontations with her as this Viking warrior, and really this Viking warrior was me seeing me, and I didn't need her to see that side of me anymore. I realized I needed to go learn how to integrate being more of a lover and relating to her in this new lover way. And in doing so, that would be the thing that would take our connection and our marriage to a more powerful, peaceful, and connected place. And then after that experience, my cousin came back outside, and we went back down by the lake and looked up at the stars. And I'll tell you, man, they were beautiful. They were so bright. We saw so many shooting stars, and it was crazy because the stars were different colors. I mean, they were blue and green and yellow and orange, and they were flickering all these different colors, and they moved and they danced and they swayed and swirled and ebbed and flowed. It was really crazy. And then at some point, my brother and his friend came down and laid on the ground beside us. And my brother and his friend, they weren't on LSD. They had just come just to hang out and check on us and see how we're doing. And it was really cool because my brother and I had some deep conversations. Months previous, he had told me to watch a Disney movie called Onward, and I had watched it several months back. And after watching it, I'd always kind of wondered, man, why did he want me to watch it? Because it was about these two brothers and their journey to go finding their dead father, essentially. And I always wondered, how their relationship in the movie, how did it reflect us, right? And after watching the movie, I had the thought that maybe he thought that he was the older brother in the movie, and maybe I was the younger brother in the movie, because the younger brother in the movie was always worried and wound really tight, and the older brother was just yo, we go with the flow and really fun. And for just content's sake, in real life, I'm the oldest sibling of three. My brother's the youngest, and then we have a middle sister. And so while we were laying under the stars, I was on LSD, he wasn't. I, for whatever reason, just felt inclined to just ask him, which was like, yo, dude, why did you want me to watch that movie, Onward, that Disney movie? And he was like, well, I liked the relationship between the two brothers. And I was like, well, what did you like about their relationship in the movie? And he said, well, at the end, they're trying to see their dad before he disappears. And the little brother, who was so worried about seeing their dad, he realized that the older brother was there being a father figure to him all along. And I was like, wait, so are you saying that I'm your father figure? And he was like, yeah, man, at times, for sure, man. I mean, he's like, there's other people in my life, but there's definitely been times you've been. And like, I was just like blown away by this, because I had like, for whatever reason, like confused that in my mind. I was like, what? I was just like really blown away. And I felt like LSD gave me an insight into my brother. Like, I felt like it opened my eyes and my heart to just see him for who he really is, and not my projections and not my stories. And like, to this day now, I feel like I just have like this deeper level of like full on acceptance for him and for who he is and like where he is in his own journey. And it was just like a really, really cool takeaway for me, a really great experience, deep connection with him. And then after that, I had to go pee again. So we decided to go back inside the house and go pee again, and then go back outside and sit underneath a tree in the front yard. So we went up to the house, and then we went and sat under this tree. And underneath the tree, I had this huge breakthrough around food. Like, for the past 8 weeks or so, I'd been eating keto and keeping my carb count below 20 grams a day. And once every 3 weeks, I'll go on like a full-on carb binge to reset my system, like Krispy Kreme donuts for breakfast. I say breakfast, like 10 or 11 a.m. And then like pasta, like just really a carb binge to reset my system. And so for this journey, I brought my own food, which is a bag of beef jerky that had 0 grams, 0 carbs, because like I'm like, dude, I'm on keto again until 2 more weeks when I get to reset. And so under that tree, at whatever time it was, 2 in the morning or something, I opened up that bag and took a bit of the beef jerky out of the meat. And I just had this like eureka moment. I was like, why do we humans mess up our food? Like, really, like, all we need to do is eat meat and vegetables, like food from the earth. That's it. Like, if we do that, we don't need some fancy diet. Like, we would be healthy if we just ate meat and vegetables, like in healthy, proper amounts. And again, this is hard to describe with words, because this realization was like this full-on, full-body experience for me, where like I just didn't crave or desire processed food anymore. Like, I love Reese's Pieces. I genuinely love them. But now, after this journey, I legitimately don't crave or desire them. I could eat them if I wanted to, but I just don't really need it. I'm just more like craving good meats, good vegetables. I don't even crave carbs. I'm like, I don't even want like rice or couscous or anything of that nature. I'm just more like, hey, can I have my steak and broccoli? Can I have some arugula and some ground beef and some cheese? Like, I don't know. It's just like something within me just like shifted. It's kind of weird that it just like shifted. And it's like, from now on, I just want to eat food from the earth, and every once in 3 weeks, I will just like indulge in the human created processed food, simply because, number one, I need to reset my system, and number two, it's just a potential of the human experience. I'm like, well, I don't want to deprive myself of the human experience and have some crazy chemical concocted thing by a human. Like, that could be a fun experience once every 3 weeks. And so this is kind of where I landed on food, and it was just like super powerful for me. And my cousin told me the next day he was at the grocery store, and he was walking through, and he picked up some milk duds, and then he remembered us having that conversation about food. And for whatever reason, he was like, I don't need the milk duds, and put them back down. So it's crazy, because he even had a breakthrough around food. But that was my big breakthrough around food. It definitely changed my relationship around food, my eating patterns. Like, it's yeah, it's like coming from a new level of like power rather than just like discipline and purpose. It's just almost like a new natural way of who I am now. It's hard to explain. And then to wrap this experience up, my cousin started talking about religion. We're still sitting underneath the tree. And he started talking about religion and how people like get hung up on religion and they make a thing about this denomination or that denomination or this spiritual path or that spiritual path. And what I mean by getting hung up on things is people believe like, well, this path or that path is the right way or the wrong way. And my cousin couldn't really understand it. Like, why do people get so hung up on things? And so I tried to help him understand consciousness at a deep root level. And after I did, he was like, okay, I get that. But how did consciousness begin? And I was like, dude, you won't ever understand how consciousness began because it's infinite. It's ever expanding. It's ever evolving. You'll never arrive at why. And he experientially just like got it and realized how much time in his own life he wastes on asking and thinking about why, but why, but why, but why, but why, just like thinking, rather than just taking time to get clear on what he desires and then create the thing that he desires. And the crazy big breakthrough for me in this conversation was as I was attempting to explain how people make a thing out of a path and how they miss the point, I realized, and I could see it, it's kind of hard to explain, I realized that the human ego attempts to control. Like, that's what the human ego does. It attempts to control. That's what it does. And that's what the ego is made for, to control, to keep us safe. Yet what the ego does in doing so, when it tries to control one thing, the one thing then gets like splintered off into four things. And I'm not saying this is scientific. This was just like the visual I was given. It was just like there's this one thing, and then when we try to control it, it like splits off into four things. And then when the ego then attempts to control the four things, it then gets splintered off into 16 things. And then on the splintering goes as the ego continues to control things. And for me, this really helped me understand like why there are so many various religious belief systems. And why like I'm at this place in life where I keep finding myself wanting to like dive deeper into the primal ways of being as a human being and communing with the earth and spirit in like this primal way. Like I'm in this season of like diving into indigenous cultures and what were their spiritual practices and how do they connect to earth. Like I just feel like in that primal place there's this purity to everything. It's like I'm following things back to its source. And this was a really big breakthrough for me because part of what I desire to create for myself and for my clients moving forward is kind of like this returning of a home, so to speak, like to experience and start practicing some of like the basic primal fundamental elements of creation and communion, because in that experience, like you just feel more whole and complete. And again, it's just like a coming back to home, and from that place of home you have a new level of power, and in that new level of power you have more agency, and in that agency you get to then channel your power into full-on creation because you create, because that's what you do. So there you have it, my friend, like my first LSD experience. I know that was like all over the place, but my experience really was all over the place, and it just kind of like came in waves. And I'll tell you what, it was a long journey. Typically, like my other journeys were probably a 4 to 6 hour experience. I took the 3 tabs at like 6:30 p.m. and I was still in the experience, like still hallucinating, still able to process things very quickly at 4:30 a.m. the next morning. And honestly, I could still feel it in my body until around 5 p.m. the next day. Like by the time I woke up at 8 a.m., like I went to bed at 4:30, like I was still hallucinating. By the time I woke up at 8 a.m., I wasn't hallucinating anymore, but I could still feel the LSD in my body until around 5 p.m. The next day. It's just crazy. I never thought in my entire life that I would ever do LSD. I really, really didn't. And I never really have been into drugs or anything like that. Yet the more I experience with psychedelics, I find that they can be extremely powerful in helping us like just kind of be the powerful creators that we are designed to be. And the cool thing about psychedelics, and there's massive amounts of scientific studies on this, is that when someone does them, they don't just want to do them again. Like there's massive scientific studies and data that show psychedelics are non-addictive. Like there's science that back that up. You can go Google this, you can go research this, and this isn't just like some psychedelic cybernaut or whatever they call them. I don't know their words. There's a word for people who do psychedelics all the time. Psychonauts? I don't remember what the fuck word it is. Anyway, here's the point. There's science that shows that psychedelics are non-addictive. It's just like big pharma and the media and other things that have totally manipulated the narrative to make them this terrible, terrible thing. And again, I am not advocating that you do them. That is not what I'm saying. There is definitely a process. I think a lot of people make a mistake on taking psychedelics recreationally and taking them at a party, and they're not clear on their setting, they're not clear on their intentions, they don't do the proper prep work. And then there's just massive amounts of studies that show when somebody uses psychedelics, let's say with a psychotherapist, and the setting is right and their intentions are right and they have somebody to guide them through the experience, like they collapse years of healing, and some really miraculous things are being done with psychedelics. And I never thought I would ever do them. And I'm just saying I'm really glad I have, because MDMA, psilocybin, and now LSD, those are the three that I've done and over the past 3 years essentially. And they have legitimately changed my life. If you haven't listened to my episode number 5 about my psilocybin journey, I mean, psilocybin legitimately kept me from like killing myself. It was crazy. You can go listen to all about that on episode number 5. And so I'll just say, like, if you feel you're called to them, like psychedelics, I believe you're called to them for a reason. And if you use them consciously for healing and really activating your soul, they seem to guide you to massive breakthroughs and up levels. And once you're done, you're just like done. And so kind of my huge lesson from LSD is it just really revealed some big breakthroughs, some big lessons, huge lessons, from creating simply because we create, to eating meat and vegetables, to better understanding the ego. And I hope by sharing my honest experience, some of these lessons are passed on to you. So my invitation to you this day is this. What would your life and business be like if you created simply because you create? Like, how much internal pressure would simply just melt away if your driving force to produce was nothing more than you choosing to create because you choose to create? My friend, I hope this episode served you in some way. If you enjoyed this episode, if it inspired you in some way, I would love to hear about it and just really know, like, what was one of your biggest takeaways from this episode? Simply take a screenshot of you listening on your device, post it over to your Instagram stories, and tag me at AJ Amix. Again, tag me over in your Instagram stories. Thank you so much for being here. That's going to do it for this crazy, weird episode of the Anthony John Amix podcast. Until next time, my friend, I'm out. Peace.
Well, that's all I've got for this episode of the Anthony John Amix podcast. But we have plenty more to help you become unstoppable in life and business. So head on over to ajamix.com for exclusive resources, information, and tools to help you break through to a new level of freedom, purpose, and success. I look forward to having you back for the next episode. Bye for now.